I'll add my welcome to chapel this morning. I'm Rod Stewart, Associate Provost in Academic Affairs. This morning we'll honor some of you for outstanding achievements. As a community of learners, it's important to recognize those that have achieved academic honors and departmental distinctions. We want to celebrate accomplishment and honor success. We'll begin today with the Department of Biology and Chemistry. In receiving departmental honors recognition and honors in the major, will the following students please come forward? For biology, Samantha L. Luce. Also for biology, Elizabeth A. Brueggemann. For biochemistry, Rachel A. Peabody. Chemistry, Sarah E. Boyer. Receiving honors in the major, will the following students please come forward? In biology, Samuel D. Burkle. In biology, Haley N. Coggins. Chemistry, Elizabeth R. Pettifer. Chemistry, Elizabeth M. Sowers. And for other biology and chemistry awards, would the following students come forward? For the Freshman Organic Chemistry Award, Logan Robart. The Silver Beaker Award, Alyssa L. Walker. The MSU American Chemical Society Chemistry Award, Elizabeth R. Pettifer. Now receiving departmental honors recognition from the Gainey School of Business, will the following students come forward? In accounting, Macy J. Howdyshall. In accounting, Nuri Zhang. In accounting, Sarah A. Ray. In business administration, Samantha M. Beck. Business administration, Jacob W. Hoppy. Business administration, Thomas A. Starks Jr. International business, Heidi J. Mewenberg. In marketing, Caleb Saylor. And receiving the Enacta Student Leadership Award, Hannah R. Snyder. Now receiving department honors recognition from the Department of Communication, will the following students please come forward? Communication, Amanda J. Grimes. Communication, Lindsay S. Velick. In drama, Rachel C. Gerald. In video and film, Emma L. Parker. Now receiving honors from the School of Education, will the following students come forward for departmental honors? Early Childhood Education, Rebecca M. Johnson. In elementary education, Kelly M. Knust. In secondary education, Rebecca R. Reilly. Special education, Hannah E. Hoffman. Now receiving recognition from the English department, would these students please come forward? In English, Rebecca A. Dennings. Morgan R. Foster. Allison M. Westra. And receiving honors in the major, Teresa M. Tate. The following students have been inducted into Sigma Tau Delta Honor Society for English. Would you please stand to be recognized? Selena M. De La Rosa and Carly A. Thompson. Receiving honors now from Health, Human Performance, and Recreation, will the following students come forward for departmental honors? In Health and Exercise Science, Rachel I. Delancey and Kylie F. Townsley. now being recognized by the History, Geography, and Political Science Department. Would the following students please come forward to receive departmental honors, both in history, Allie L. Herkenroder and Heather N. Lehman. The Department of Math, Computer Science, and Physics recognizes these students with departmental honors. Would the following students come forward? Actuarial Science, Daniel R. Selden, and Math Secondary Education, Sarah E. Boyer. The Music Department recognizes the following students with departmental honors: Vocal Music Education, Kyla Wright, and in Worship Arts, Dylan Crossan. Receiving departmental honors for psychology, Corey E. Good. And receiving honors in the major, Ines Corell and Rhiannon Nadratowski. The following students have been inducted into Psi Chi National Society for Psychology. Please stand and be recognized. Cassandra E. Bestman, Katie P. Gibson, Audra M. Goodluck, Lily K. Heffeneider, Rachel D. Janes, Natalie L. Marino, Ellen G. Perry, Danielle H. Rolla, Benjamin H. Shaw, Melissa J. Wessling, Deja N. Williams. Now receiving departmental honors from social work, would Sarah L. Young please come forward? The following students have been inducted into Phi Alpha Society for Social Work. Please stand. Ellen G. Perry and Rebecca Kinney. From the Sociology Department, would Lindsay A. Burrell come forward for honors in the major and departmental honors? The following students come forward as departmental honorees: Clinical Sociology, Lindsay Grubb, and Criminal Justice, Audra M. Goodluck. The following students have been inducted into Alpha Kappa Delta, the National Honor Society for Sociology. Would you please stand as your name is called? Cleo J. Berry, Lindsay A. Burrell, Abigail Chebnowski, Micah J. Cross, Quinn A. DeCenzo, Lydia M. Dewing, Audra M. Goodluck, Lindsay Grubb, Tabitha M. Harden, Lily K. Heffeneider, Melissa A. Kennel, Julie D. Loudon, Michael Andersma, Rebecca Snyder, Caitlin J. Stout, Noel C. Tackett, and Abigail A. Wells. From the Theology Department, would Anthony L. Nelson come forward for both honors in the major and departmental honors? And receiving departmental award for philosophy, Baylor Smith. And would the following students please come forward for additional awards from the Theology Department? The Greek Award, Madison N. Bridges and Andrew S. Bridgman. Department of World Languages recognizes Rebecca Reilly for departmental honors, but she's out of the country, as I understand, and not here, but let's give her a round of applause, please. We now ask the following students graduating as EP Hart Honors Scholars, please stand to be recognized. Kaylee M. Anderson, Ha Young Gloria Bang, Samuel D. Burkle, Sarah E. Bauer, Lindsay A. Burrell, Justine D. Clement, Jennifer Koffel, Haley N. Coggins, Joseph D. Deerduff, Catherine F. Iverson, Julia E. Kleinstra, Samantha Luce, Kayla A. Manti, Daniel R. Selden, Kyla P. Wright. We now move to the broader-based honors with 3 different categories. First, Alpha Kappa Sigma is an honor society of free Methodist educational institutions. Membership is based on scholarship, character, and extracurricular involvement, and selection is by the faculty. These seniors must be in the upper 1/4 of the graduating class. Second, Who's Who among students in American universities and colleges is a national program which honors student leaders for their scholastic and community achievement. Selection for this honor is made by a vote of seniors and faculty. With the students receiving Alpha Kappa Sigma and Who's Who honors as listed in the program, please stand to be recognized. Congratulations. The following 2 graduating seniors have completed 7 semesters at Spring Arbor University and achieved a 4.0 cumulative GPA. They are receiving a certificate and a medal to honor their accomplishments. Would the following students please come forward? Dylan Crossan and Caitlin J. Field. Steve Castle, Assistant Director of Alumni Relations, will announce the winner of the 2016-17 Concept in Action Alumni Award.
Sorry for the delay. One of the annual awards granted by the Alumni Association is the Concept in Action Award. This award is presented to a graduating campus senior who embodies the values and goals of the Spring Arbor University concept, as demonstrated through academic excellence, leadership qualities, exceptional commitment to serving others, and a life dedicated to the way of Christ. This past month, all students, staff, and faculty had an opportunity to nominate a senior for this award, and several great candidates emerged. The recipient of this year's Concept in Action Award has been an integral part of the Spring Arbor University community. Bringing excellence to the Department of Communications and Media, this student has consistently applied their academic knowledge and heart for the world to service inside and outside of the classroom. In the past 4 years, this senior has actively engaged the SAU community by competing on the women's cross-country team, serving as an RA in Lowell Hall, serving as the Spiritual Life Director for SGA, co-leading the Hamtramck Spring Break missions trip, and serving as the student manager for Sacred Grounds. And despite all of these extracurricular involvements, she has managed to maintain a 3.99 GPA. With a heart for anti-human trafficking causes, she has engaged the issue with passion and creativity on campus and at Spring Arbor Free Methodist Church. Her original spoken word presentation, first performed in rhetoric class, was recorded and won recognition in film outside of the university. In an independent study, she organized and implemented a Freedom Sunday at her home church, an event that was dedicated to anti-human trafficking awareness and education. The award recipient has a dream to eventually set up a bakery business in an urban area where she can hire impoverished women as a way to develop their personal and professional lives. And anyone who has tasted her cupcakes at Sacred Grounds knows she has what it takes to be successful in business, and that her dream is already becoming a reality. Her love for Christ, her credibility, compassion, and creativity has been a gift to the SAU and the surrounding community. The Spring Arbor University Alumni Association is pleased to grant the 2017 Concept in Action Award to Lindsay Velick.
Next, Dr. Kimberly Rupert, the provost of the university, will make our presentation for the McKenna Scholarship.
Thank you. The McKenna Scholarship is made possible through a generous endowment fund established by David and Janet McKenna in honor of his sister, Pat Saradarian, for the purpose of highlighting the concept through encouraging and supporting scholarly contributions of junior faculty. I am happy to announce the recipient of this year's McKenna Scholarship, Assistant Professor of English, J. Cameron Moore. Cameron, would you please come forward?
Now, Joey Dearduff, Student Body President, will make our final presentation of the morning, the Excellence in Teaching Award.
The Teaching Excellence Award is granted each year by the senior class to one member of the Spring Arbor University faculty. That faculty member inspires us all to live the concept in every area of our lives. They do this by modeling what it means to be fully committed to Jesus Christ as our example for learning and living. This year's Teaching Excellence winner exemplifies the concept through her passion for her area of study. She believes in her students and sees their talents and is always challenging her students to expand on their thinking. Our Teaching Excellence winner cares and respects every student and finds time to get to know them at a personal and spiritual level and is always willing to pray with students. If there is a need, she is the first to step up and offer help. Many students have grown to love her on cross-cultural trips and see the joy she has for life. Please join me in congratulating Professor of Education, Dr. Sharon Joplin, as the Spring Arbor University 2017 Teaching Excellence Award winner.
Congratulations, Sharon. And now I'll turn the podium over to Associate Professor of English, Dr. Jack Baker.
This never gets easier, by the way, no matter how many times I'm in front of people. Oh, you saw the title. Okay. I'd like to talk to you today about alternative facts, how narrative makes goodness and truth compelling. Today, we've celebrated the accomplishments of your colleagues who have striven to pursue excellence in their academic work. Your faculty are proud of you for your perseverance. And since we're celebrating academic excellence, I thought it would be appropriate to offer some words that appeal to both our intellects and our affections. Because I believe that academic work, education, is not only the work of the head, but also, and perhaps more importantly, the work of the heart. I would even go so far as to claim that what we do here at SAU is perhaps better described not as education, a leading out of something, but as manuduction, a leading by the hand. Since we advocate whole person education here, we understand our work to be pastoral as well as academic. For many of us, what we do here is not work, it's a vocation. Thus, your faculty and staff walk beside you, guiding you by the hand, maybe even at times having to drag you by the hand, maybe. And remember, being led by the hand implies a destination. In other words, you're being led somewhere. And since this is higher education, we ought to be leading you up and out. So what are you being led up and out of? Hopefully, when your time here at SAU comes to an end, you'll be able to reflect upon the person you were when you got here and the person you are now. I furthermore hope that you'll be able to articulate how this education you've immersed yourself in as an undergraduate has set you forth on another path of your journey of becoming. At the end of your time here, I'm less concerned with what you will do for a living and more concerned with what type of person you will become. We talk about transformational education a lot around here. You're probably tired of hearing about it. And when we do so, I think immediately of Paul's words in chapter 12 of his letter to the Romans. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. And be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that ye may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. Now, I'm not a biblical scholar, but when I hear these words, I don't interpret them to mean that Paul's telling us to escape from the world because it's evil, or to fear its corrupting powers like the plague. Quite the contrary. I think he's telling his contemporaries and us to be engaged in the world, but not persuaded by the dominant philosophies of the day, to be critical participants in the contemporary world who are transformed by the renewing of our minds. This work of transformation involves both intellect and affect, that which we think and that which we love. But I find Paul's exhortation particularly challenging today because we are faced with unprecedented doubt concerning the place of facts in relationship to truth. It seems to me that one of the patterns of the world we're up against is the manipulation, corruption, and deconstruction of truth. It seems that facts have failed us. They failed truth. They no longer, at least on a cultural and political level, carry the persuasive weight we need them to carry. So today I want to talk about what it looks like for us to be critical participants in a contemporary world that is deeply suspicious of facts in service of truth. What a wild year it has been in this only world of ours. I don't plan to rehash all that's transpired over the past 12 months. Suffice it to say, we're in the midst of significant cultural, political, religious, and philosophical turmoil across the globe. What we've seen is a sort of turning inward, a desire to insulate ourselves. We fervently desire to clearly delineate who is inside and who's outside. We've seen this desire with Brexit. We've seen it with the resurgence of nationalism in England, France, and America. And we've seen it with the redefinition of facts, not as truth about a thing as opposed to interpretation, but as bits of knowledge that are individually or collectively constructed. As one writer has recently put it, call it what you want: relativism, constructivism, deconstruction, postmodernism, critique. The idea is the same. Truth is not found, but made. And making truth means exercising power. If that sounds familiar to you, it's because thinkers like Friedrich Nietzsche have been making such claims about truth for over a century in the West. There are no facts, only interpretations, Nietzsche claims. We are perhaps more Nietzschean than we're comfortable admitting. Of course, deconstructing truth claims is nothing new. Critical social scientists and humanists have been doing this work on an intellectual and academic level for over half a century. But this year was special. right? For instance, the Oxford Dictionaries chose post-truth as their 2016 word of the year. That doesn't bode well for us, by the way. They define the adjective as relating to or denoting circumstances in which objective facts are less influential in shaping public opinion than appeals to emotion and personal belief. I wonder, do we ask now, what is truth, or do we ask, whose truth? And here's a quote from a contemporary philosopher. I want you to listen to these words with your heads and your hearts. Perception is more important than reality. If someone perceives something to be true, it is more important than if it is in fact true. This doesn't mean you should be duplicitous or deceitful, but don't go out of your way to correct a false assumption if it plays to your advantage. How does this quote make you feel about truth, about facts? What does it say to your head and your heart? Would it trouble you to know that this quote is from a 2009 book written by one of the president's senior advisors? Are you so tied to a political party that though this quote disturbs you, you're unwilling to cede its unchristian nature? Well, for what it's worth, this quote is taken from Ivanka Trump's book, The Trump Card, Playing to Win in Work and Life. We saw this playing fast and loose with facts and truth reach a fever pitch this past January when Kellyanne Conway, another advisor to President Trump, coined the phrase alternative facts when disputing Press Secretary Sean Spicer's claims concerning the size of inaugural crowds. Though she made waves throughout the political world with her verbiage, there was an interesting effect occurring over on Amazon.com. Because Conway's alternative facts drew immediate comparisons to the doublespeak promoted by the Ministry of Truth in Orwell's dystopian novel 1984, Orwell's novel saw a 10,000% increase in sales in the days following her coinage. And Signet Classics ordered 75,000 copy reprint of the book in response, with more printings planned after that. Apparently, alternative facts are lucrative. So what are we to do in the midst of alternative facts? Well, if Amazon.com is correct, it appears we turn to narrative. As a professor of literature, I already believe in and live out the power of narrative on a daily basis. It's part of my DNA. But when folks who don't typically immerse themselves in narrative begin turning to a work like 1984 for instruction and counsel, I take notice. I've taken notice. And here's what I've noticed. I believe narrative has the power to make goodness and truth compelling today in a way that facts do not. You might be surprised to hear this, but I'd like to spend the second part of my talk exploring the power of narrative to make goodness and truth compelling in our lives by considering the fictional world and works of Wendell Berry. It's not funny. Berry is an essayist, poet, novelist, and farmer who lives in a small Kentucky town and is one of America's most recognized living authors. And if you spend any time in the English department, I'm sorry, but you're going to be tired of hearing his name when you're done with us. Shh. Berry's created a fictional world named Port William that spans many books and short stories and is populated with sundry folk. A world that a reader comes to love because she comes to love the place and the people who inhabit it. This fictional world, which reaches back to before the Civil War and up to the present day, is mundane, yet beautiful, broken, yet somehow held together. In our industrial age, it can be nearly impossible to imagine how to lead healthy lives. We're so deeply formed by our culture's consumerist vision of the good life that it's difficult to conceive of living differently. Berry's stories, however, imagine an alternative order, one that attempts to fit together the fragmented pieces of our lives into a beautiful whole. What's more, Berry's narratives are essentially moral. That is, they teach us something about how we ought to live and act and be in the world. But his fiction isn't preachy. It doesn't give us a set of rules to follow or facts to bludgeon our enemies upside the head with. The foundations of Port William are not built from heavy-handed moralism or fact-based argumentation, because these things are insufficient to change our minds or move us to action. Barry understands that all too often we humans don't do what we already know to be right. So what we really need is not more moral instruction about the dangers of industrial agriculture, unchecked capitalism, or techno-utopianism. Rather, we need stories that will instruct our imaginations and affections so that we can envision and desire and embody goodness and truth. This is precisely what his fiction does. As Stanley Hauerwas writes, Barrie's novels do what is next to impossible in our time, and that is make goodness compelling. As an example of the insufficiency of fact-based argumentation, the philosopher James K.A. Smith recounts an occasion when he found himself reading Wendell Berry in the Costco food court, which is probably, quote, a kind of shorthand for Barry's picture of the sixth circle of hell, unquote. This experience brought home to Smith the gap between my thought and my action, between my passionate intellectual assent to Barry's ideas and my status quo action. Smith uses this example to point out that quite often what we need is not better thinking, but better habits and imaginations. As he claims later, human beings are narrative animals who are less convinced by arguments than moved by stories. Our being in the world is more aesthetic than deductive, better captured by narrative than analysis. So, perhaps reading narratives and learning to desire the goodness and truth that they portray shape us on a more fundamental level than does merely nodding in agreement with facts and figures. Perhaps the stories of authors like Barry can lead us out of the Costco food court and through a purgatorial refinement of our loves and desires. In his essay, In Defense of Literacy, Barry himself argues that narrative, that is literature, is our only defense against the language as weapon so prevalent today. He writes, "What is our defense against this sort of language, this language as weapon? There's only one. We must know a better language. We must speak and teach our children to speak, a language precise and articulate and lively enough to tell the truth about the world as we know it. And to do this, we must know something of the roots and resources of our language. We must know its literature. The only defense against the worst is a knowledge of the best. By their ignorance, people enfranchise their exploiters." Wah, wah, right? No, it sounds really depressing. But here's the great news, folks. You're students at a university that believes the study of literature to be essential in your education. Though literature is imaginative, we do well to teach it as though it bears important truths about our place in the world. Although this sounds simplistic, one rather revolutionary way to read works of literature is as if they are indeed about the world. In one class that Barry taught at the University of Kentucky, he assigned works by Shakespeare, Spencer, and Milton, alongside agricultural texts by Albert Howard, F.H. King, and Wes Jackson. As one of his students recounts, Barry read these literary works both for pleasure and instruction, both for their beauty and for their truth. Quote, "What he watched for in his reading and taught for us to watch for are the ways a text intersects with the practical and ethical life. This is another reason why we ought to turn to Barry's fiction and other works of literature for instruction. Imaginative literature can teach us truths about the world and about our responsibilities in it." Yet, in order for us to learn such truths from literature, we must read with an openness to how literary works might reveal and reform our affections and imaginations. We have to be open to it. What this means is simply that when we encounter works of art, we both see and are seen by them. To give one example, consider the Old Testament story where King David commits adultery with Bathsheba. Bathsheba is the wife of Uriah, one of David's loyal soldiers, yet David kills him in an attempt to cover up his sin. When the prophet Nathan arrives at court to confront David, Nathan does not immediately condemn him, but rather tells him a story. There were two neighbors. One was wealthy and had a huge flock of sheep, and the other was poor and had one lamb that the family treated as a household pet. When a traveler came, the rich man took the poor man's lamb and killed it to feed his guest. David's anger is greatly kindled, on hearing this story. And he declares to Nathan that the rich man must pay restitution for the lamb and then be executed. It is at this point that Nathan says to David, "Thou art the man." Turning the judgment David has delivered back upon David himself. As David Jeffrey and Gregory Maillet observe, David's impulsive interpretation and rush to judgment regarding the story of the purloined lamb constitutes much more than a literary interpretation. His response reveals that Nathan's parable has been diagnostic of the heart of its hearer. The story has interpreted the interpreter. This, folks, is literature's highest power: to hold a mirror to the reader's heart and provoke change. In Rilke's famous poem about the broken statue of Apollo, the poet shifts adeptly from describing the statue's appearance to voicing the statue's claim upon the viewer. There is no place at all that isn't looking at you. You must change your life. This has been my own experience as a reader of Barrie's fiction. When I read his stories about the beautiful but damaged community of Port William, I learn to long for its health and restoration. Yet when I read the last page of a story and look up from the book, I ask myself, why don't I care this way about the place where I live? What does my place need from me to grow healthier? If we let it, literature can reshape our imaginations and affections and teach us how to love people and places. In this way, literature is language made responsible, language that challenges us to consider how we can better respond to our place in the world. At its best, then, literature reads us and interprets our desires, helping us become more accountable dwellers in our world. And so, look at this. It's great in time. Fantastic. You don't know how terrified I was that I was going to go over on time. Literally almost got sick on stage. No, I did not. Or did I? I'd like to conclude by turning to one of the members of Barrie's Port William community, Jaber Crow, who has shaped both my intellect and my affections, who's compelled me to goodness and truth. In his eponymous novel, Jaber Crow, it's a short title, by the way, the life story of Jaber Crow, barber of Port William membership, as written by himself, Jaber narrates his life, which he understands in his old age to have been a pilgrimage to divine love. This is Jaber. If you could do it, I suppose it would be a good idea to live your life in a straight line, starting, say, in the dark wood of error and proceeding by logical steps through hell and purgatory and into heaven. Or you could take the King's Highway past appropriately named dangers, toils, and snares, and finally cross the river of death and enter the celestial city. That is not the way I have done it so far. I am a pilgrim, but my pilgrimage has been wandering and unmarked. Often what has looked like a straight line to me has been a circle or a doubling back. I've been in the dark wood of error any number of times. I have known something of hell, purgatory, and heaven, but not always in that order. The names of many snares and dangers have been known to me, but I have seen them only in looking back. Often I have not known where I was going until I was already there. I've had my share of desires and goals, but my life has come to me, or I have gone to it, mainly by way of mistakes and surprises. Often I have received better than I deserved. Often my fairest hopes have rested on bad mistakes. I am an ignorant pilgrim, crossing a dark valley, and yet for a long time, looking back, I've been unable to shake off the feeling that I have been led. Make of that what you will. Jaber is, to say the least, an unusual character, and his pilgrimage is marked by joy and sorrow because it involves people, and people are imperfect. They're a mess. Yet rather than let the divisions of Port William turn him into a person who hates that which he doesn't understand, the other, the outsider, he comes to understand how even his enemies are bound to him by love. Earlier in the novel, he has a vision in the small town church in which young and old long dead and still living, are gathered together in God's love. Later in the novel, a second vision replaces the first. I had been the barber in Port William for 14 years by then, and the grave digger and church janitor for 6 years. I told you he was strange. My mind had begun to sink into the place. This was a feeling. It had grown into me from what I had learned at my work and all I had heard from Matt Feltner and the others who were the community's rememberers, and from what I remembered myself. The feeling was that I could not be extracted from Port William like a pit from a plum, and that it could not be extracted from me. Even death could not set it and me apart. History overflows time. Love overflows the allowance of the world. All the vessels overflow, and no end or limit stays put. Every shakeable thing has got to be shaken. In a sense, nothing that was ever lost in Port William ever has been replaced. In another sense, nothing is ever lost. And we are compacted together forever, even by our failures, our regrets, and our longings. My vision of the gathered church that had come to me after I became the janitor had been replaced by a vision of the gathered community. What I saw now was the community, imperfect and irresolute, but held together by the frayed and always fraying, incomplete and yet ever holding bonds of the various sorts of affections. There had maybe never been anybody who had not been loved by somebody, who had been loved by somebody else, and so on and on. If you could go back into the story of Uncle Ive and Verna Scholes, you would find, certainly before and maybe after, somebody who loved them both. It was a community always disappointed in itself, disappointing its members, always trying to contain its divisions and gentle its meanness, always failing and yet always preserving a sort of will toward goodwill. I knew that in the midst of all the ignorance and error, this was a membership. It was the membership of Port William and no other place on earth. My vision gathered the community as it never has been and never will be gathered in this world of time. For the community must always be marred by members who are indifferent to it or against it, who are nonetheless its members and maybe nonetheless essential to it. And yet, I saw them all as somehow perfected beyond time by one another's love, compassion, and forgiveness. As it is said, we may be perfected by grace. And so, there we all were on a little wave of time lifting up to eternity, and none of us ever in time would know what to make of it. How could we? It's a mystery, for we are eternal beings living in time. Did I ever think that anybody would understand it? Yes. Once. I thought once that I would finally understand it. While there are many such profound moments in Jaber's narrative, I want to close with a passage from the end of the novel where he has finally come to understand that this is a book about heaven, and thus a book about loving God and loving one's neighbors. But coming to the conclusion that he's written a book about heaven does not give Jaber factual certainty about his faith. After all, it likely would lose the name of faith if he had such. Instead, just as Christ compelled his audiences to goodness and truth through narrative, Jaber tells the parable of the man in the well. But faith is not necessary, or not soon a resting place. Faith puts you out on a wide river in a little boat, in the fog, in the dark. Even a man of faith knows that we've all got to go through enough to kill us. As a man of faith, I've thought a considerable amount about a friend of mine, imagined, but also real. I call the man in the well. The now wooded or re-wooded slopes and hollows hereabouts are strewn with abandoned homesteads, the remains of another kind of world. Most of them by now have no buildings left. Everything about them that would rot has rotted. What you find now in those places when you come upon them are things that were built of stone: foundations, cellars, chimneys, wells. Sometimes the wells are deep, dug to the bedrock and beyond, and walled with rock laid up without mortar. Virtually every rock in a structure like that, if it is built right, is a keystone. It can't move in or out. Those walls laid underground where there is no freezing and thawing will last, I guess, almost forever. Sometimes the well is the only structure remaining, and there will be no visible sign of it. It'll be covered with old boards in some stage of decay, green with moss or covered with leaves. It's a perfect trap, and now and then you find that rabbits and groundhogs have blundered in and drowned. A man, too, could blunder into one. Imagine a hunter, somebody from a city some distance away who has a job he doesn't like and who has come alone out into the country to hunt on a Saturday. It's beautiful, a beautiful, perfect fall day, and the man feels free. He's left all his constraints and worries and fears behind. Nobody knows where he is. Anybody who wanted to complain or accuse or collect a debt could not find him. The morning that started frosty has grown warm. The sky seems to give its luster to everything in the world. The man feels strong and fine. His gun lies ready in the crook of his arm, though he really doesn't care whether he finds game or not. He has a sandwich and a candy bar in his coat pocket. And then, not looking where he's going, which is easy enough on such a day, he steps onto the rotten board that covers one of those old wells, and down he goes. He disappears suddenly out of the lighted world. He falls so quickly that he doesn't have time even to ask what's happening. He hits water, goes under, comes up, swims, or clings to the wall, inserting his fingers between the rocks. And now, I think you cannot help imagining the way it would be with him. He looks up and sees how far down he has come. The sky that was so large and reassuring only seconds ago is now just a small blue picture of itself, far away. His first thought is that he's alone. Nobody knows where he is. These two great pleasures that were his freedom have now become his prison, perhaps his tomb. He calls out, for might not somebody chance to be nearby just as he chanced to fall into the well? And he hears himself enclosed within the sound of his own calling voice. How does this story end? Does he save himself? Is he athletic enough, maybe, to get his boots off and climb out, clawing with his fingers and toes into the grudging holds between the rocks of the wall? Does he climb up and fall back? Does somebody, in fact, for a wonder, chance to pass nearby and hear him? Does he despair, give up, and drown? Does he, despairing, pray finally the first true prayer of his life? Listen. There is a light that includes our darkness, a day that shines down even on the clouds. A man of faith believes that the man in the well is not lost. He does not believe this easily or without pain, but he believes it. His belief is a kind of knowledge beyond any way of knowing. He believes that the child in the womb is not lost, nor is the man whose work has come to nothing, nor is the old woman forsaken in a nursing home in California. He believes that those who make their bed in hell are not lost, or those who dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, or the lame man at Bethesda pool, or Lazarus in the grave, or those who pray, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. Have mercy. Each time I finish Jaber Crow, I do so with wet cheeks. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I'm convicted of the hatred I hold in my heart. I'm inspired to mend relationships. I'm encouraged to have faith even in the midst of my doubt. So at a time when facts are alternative and truth is stranger, maybe we ought to consider turning to narratives and heed the words of Christ himself. He that hath ears to hear, let him hear.